Why did CBS News reporter Lara Logan get detained today? Why were she and her TV crew held by police today? Why did CNN's Anderson Cooper get physically attacked today? This is the footage of him getting roughed up yesterday. Today it happened again as the vehicle he was traveling in came under assault. Why did an ABC News cameraman and producer get threatened with beheading today? Why were Fox News correspondent Greg Palkot and his cameraman Olaf Wigg severely beaten and hospitalized today? Why was ABC News correspondent Christiane Amanpour harassed and jostled on the streets? Why was her camera crew's car attacked? Why was CBS's Katie Couric surrounded and overwhelmed in the streets? Why was the BBC's Ian Pannell accosted by a group of men while he was reporting? Why was his fellow BBC reporter Rupert Wingfield-Hayes stopped and taken into custody by police for several hours before he was released? Why were 3 Al Jazeera journalists taken into custody before they were released? Why did Swedish journalist Bert Sundström of SVT Public Television disappear and then turn up in a hospital seriously injured with stab wounds? Why are all of these journalists getting attacked? Why are all of these reporters being threatened and being hurt? What's happening in Egypt right now is not about journalism. It is not about journalists. It is about the Egyptian people trying to topple their own government. So why are all of these reporters covering that getting attacked? It is not fair to call what's happening on the streets of Egypt right now chaos. It is not fair to call it crisis. It is not fair to say this is spiraling out of control. What is happening on the ground in Egypt is planned. It is a strategy. The Egyptian government is trying to stay in power. It is trying to beat a popular uprising against it and to hold on to power as long as it can. And in order to do that, the government has made a strategic decision to use violence to get its way. First and most directly, it's using violence against the opposition protesters in the streets. Fair warning, this video we're about to show you is short. It may be difficult to watch. If you want to turn away for a second, now is the time to do so. That video, which has turned up on the internet in recent days, appears to show an Egyptian police van ramming through a crowd of anti-government protesters at top speed. While difficult to watch, that is the easiest use of violence to understand. It is simply making it physically dangerous or even deadly to protest against the government. That's first. But second, it appears to have been the government's strategy to make sure that what had been a non-violent protest movement turns violent. Why would the government want that? Why would they want a non-violent movement to turn violent? Because who would begrudge a government using force, even extreme force, to put down violent, bloody mobs in the streets? A government using force to put down a bunch of people doing this, on the other hand, that is seen as, frankly, less cool by the international community and generally by your own people. So the reason you saw everything go haywire in Egypt over the last 36 hours or so is because the government pulled out all of the stops to turn this into this. That is one side strategy in this. That is the government strategy for staying in power. What's the other side strategy against that? How can the anti-government people, the opposition forces, how can they resist and survive that strategy and still try to win? Here's how our own Richard Engel explained that last night while overlooking a full-on street battle in Cairo.
He wants everyone to be painted with a negative brush, that everyone involved here are people who want chaos and dissension, and that the president would then need to step in as a good leader to implement law and order. That's what the protesters think the scenario is, and they expect after this there will be a more serious crackdown, potentially martial law, and even more use of the goon squads.
Richard, how do protesters win against a strategy like that?
I think they win by information, and that's what they're trying to do. They have to counter this story. They have to tell people how it happened, how it really started, who is fighting. They have to remain nonviolent, and the protesters aren't doing a very good job of that. They feel attacked, and they say they have to defend themselves. It is very difficult to win when you are picked into a fight, and then if you're drawn into a fight, to try and maintain your air of being innocent and nonviolent. I don't know exactly how you do that.
Remaining non-violent in the face of violent attacks by the people you are trying to defeat? That is almost humanly impossible. It's why we lionize leaders and movements that are able to get large numbers of people to do that, to stay nonviolent even when they are physically provoked, to stay nonviolent even when they are verbally assaulted, to stay nonviolent as a central strategy of defeating the forces that are keeping you down. The opposition to Hosni Mubarak in Egypt is not new. It has long existed in various forms. He's been in power as essentially a dictator for a very long time. But this current protest movement to actually get rid of him, this movement is about now 9 days old. In 9 days, can you grow a big, organized movement that is disciplined and capable enough to do what you need to win? One that is capable of staying nonviolent when violence is the main tactic that is being used against them. It would not be a miracle if that were true, but it would be close to a miracle. The violence in Egypt right now is not a byproduct of the fact that there are anti-government demonstrations going on. The violence is not inevitable. It is a tactic that is being used by one side. It's a tactic being used by the Egyptian government, and that is obvious to anybody who's there. It is obvious to anybody who is reporting what's happening on the ground there. Which brings us back to this question. Why are we seeing journalists getting attacked? Attacked in the streets? Hunted down, rounded up, having their equipment smashed and confiscated, getting kicked out of where they are staying because the fact that they are there poses a risk to anybody else who is staying there? Why are they being attacked? Because they need to be stopped. They need to be stopped from stating the obvious. They need to be stopped from showing what's happening and what they've been reporting since it started, which is that the violence was started by the government against its own people in a last-ditch effort to stay in power. If you are the Egyptian government, that story has to be stopped. And as a result, journalism has to be stopped. And so journalists have to be stopped. And sometimes that looks like this. You do not attack reporters and cameramen, and you do not ransack press offices because you are looking for good public relations, because you want to present your spin to the world about how things are going. You do it to stop journalism. Damn the consequences. Because the real story that journalists are able to tell is so dangerous to your strategy to stay in power. The Egyptian government is trying to win. The violence is tactical. The danger to journalists is tactical. Ominously today, now that they have taken these steps towards stopping journalism, we saw them step up what they want to replace it with, their own version of the story. Today, what looked like forced confessions started to run on pro-government TV in Egypt. The Committee to Protect Journalists documented at least 7 instances on state-owned television or on private stations owned by businessmen loyal to President Mubarak, in which individuals described elaborate foreign plots to destabilize Egypt. In several instances, they were described as Israeli spies, naturally. In one instance, a woman whose face was obscured confessed to having been trained by Americans and Israelis. She went on to say that the alleged training took place in Qatar, where, wouldn't you know it, the news network Al Jazeera is based. Stopping the real journalism to make room for your own version of the facts. It is desperate, but this kind of thing has worked before. One of our NBC News correspondents who is right in the middle of all of this joins us live from Egypt next.